You know that feeling when you're driving on a long road trip? Maybe you've been in the car for 6 hours or
Oh
so.
yeah, highway hypnosis starts kicking in.
Exactly. And you pass one of those generic green signs that says, welcome to wherever, and suddenly, literally instantly, the texture of the road changes.
Right, it goes from totally smooth to completely bumpy.
Or the speed limit drops by 10 miles an hour. Or the gas station suddenly costs 20 cents more.
It's basically the only time those invisible lines actually feel physical. You cross a border and the rules just shift.
Yeah, we drive through these invisible walls every single day, but we rarely stop to ask who actually built them. I mean, we gripe about the pothole or the speeding ticket and just move on.
Right.
But there's this massive machinery behind that pothole.
Hmm.
There's a specific, well, like an operating system that decided who is responsible for the road,
Hmm.
who pays for it, and who actually has the power to fix it.
And that is the architecture of power. We tend to get so obsessed over the who of politics.
Oh, totally. The presidents, the loud personalities on TV.
Exactly. But the actual structural skeleton of a country is usually far more consequential to your daily life than whoever is sitting in the big chair.
So that is our mission today. We are doing a deep dive into this architecture of power. We've got a great stack of research here, pulling from AP human geography concepts and political science analysis to decode the two main ways countries are run.
Right, unitary governance versus federal governance.
It sounds a little academic right off the bat, I know.
It does, but stick with us because this choice between unitary and federal dictates literally everything.
Like what your child learns in school.
Yes, or whether your local dispensary is considered a legitimate business or a federal crime scene.
It is the difference between a top-down machine and a really messy, layered partnership. So let's just crack this open. Looking at the source material, the vast majority of countries on Earth,
Something like 160 out of 190.
right, they use the first system, the unitary state.
It's basically the default setting for a country.
So if I had to summarize the notes here, the unitary state seems to be built on one core concept, the pyramid.
That's a really great visual for it. In a unitary state, power is completely centralized. All sovereign authority lives at the very top with the national government.
But there are still local mayors and town councils,
Well,
right?
sure, you still have local people doing things, but, and this is the really key part, they're essentially just branch offices of the central government.
So unlike here in the U.S., where states have their own distinct rights,
Mhm.
in a unitary system, the local government only exists because the central government allows it to.
Precisely. The central government can create them, reshape them, or even dissolve them entirely if they want. The power flow is strictly one way, top down.
Like a corporate franchise.
Exactly like a franchise. If
Yeah.
you run a fast food franchise, you can hire your staff, you can keep the floors clean, but you cannot decide to change the menu.
You can't just start selling tacos because the locals want tacos.
Right, you follow the corporate strategy set by headquarters. End of story.
I mean, that sounds restrictive, but I can definitely see the appeal. If I walk into that franchise in Tokyo or Paris or New York, I know exactly what I'm getting. There's a comfort in that.
That is the biggest selling point. Uniformity. If you live in a unitary state, the laws are the same everywhere. The education system is the same. The tax structure is exactly the same.
So there's no confusion about which rules apply to you just because you crossed a county line.
None at all.
The classic example in the notes here is France.
France is the textbook definition of this. Highly centralized. Decisions are made in Paris and they just ripple out. There's actually this famous story, it might be apocryphal, about a French minister of education.
Oh, right, the watch story.
Yes. He supposedly said he could look at his watch at 10 a.m. and know exactly which page of which history book every single student in France was reading.
That is wild. It's incredibly efficient, but also a little unnerving.
They call it administrative efficiency. If the government decides to change a speed limit or update a healthcare protocol, they decide it once and it rolls out everywhere.
Yeah. You don't have to negotiate with 50 different governors to get it done.
Exactly. It's a speedboat compared to a cruise ship. It turns fast.
So who actually chooses this?
Yeah.
Because the profile in our sources suggests it works best for countries that are smaller geographically.
Which makes sense. It's a lot easier to micromanage a garden than a massive national park.
But the notes also mention demographically homogeneous populations.
Right. It works best in nation states where the population is culturally very similar.
So everyone speaks the same language, shares the same history.
Yeah, and has similar values. When that's the case, applying one set of rules from the top down really doesn't cause much friction. Japan is another great example cited here.
High consistency, centralized control.
And it works beautifully because the society is relatively uniform.
But wait, I have to stop you there. Because I'm looking at the exceptions section of the research, and there is a giant, glaring contradiction to that small country rule. China.
Ah, the China exception. This is where it gets fascinating because it proves that politics can absolutely override geography.
China is massive, physically huge, over 1 billion people, historically very diverse. By all the logic we just laid out, trying to run that from a single office in Beijing should be a logistical nightmare.
It should be impossible.
And yet they maintain a strict unitary structure.
They do. In China, the priority isn't administrative ease, it's political control. The ruling party uses the unitary structure to ensure that no province ever gets strong enough to challenge the center.
So those provincial governors we hear about in the news,
They aren't elected by the locals to fight for local interests. They are appointed by Beijing to enforce Beijing's will.
and if a governor steps out of line,
They are removed. It creates a unified front in a country that might otherwise fracture. It defies the whole small country trend just to maintain an iron grip.
wow. Okay, so unitary is the command and control model. Efficient, uniform, but rigid. Let's flip the switch to Section 2, the federal state,
The layered partnership.
which is what we are used to in the United States, but also places like Canada, Germany, Brazil, India. The notes define federalism as distributed power. But how is that actually different from the branch office model? Because states still have to follow national laws.
They do, but the origin of their power is completely different. In a federal system, the subnational units, the states, provinces, whatever you call them, they aren't just employees. They are partners.
So they have their own inherent power.
Yes. Their existence is usually protected by a constitution. The national government can't just wake up tomorrow and decide to delete California. California has a sovereign right to exist and govern itself in specific areas.
So if unitary is a franchise, federalism is like a condo board.
That's a decent analogy. Or think of it like a shopping mall. The mall management, the federal government owns the building. They set the opening hours, handle security, fix the roof.
Things like national defense and currency.
Exactly. But the individual stores, they decide what they sell. They decide how to decorate. If one store wants to sell sweaters and the one next door sells surfboards, the mall management generally steps back.
As long as they don't burn the mall down.
Precisely. The core of federalism is that it allows for difference within the exact same structure.
But why choose this messier system? I mean, we just spent 10 minutes talking about how efficient the unitary model is. Federalism just seems like a recipe for constant arguing.
Oh, it is absolutely a recipe for arguments. But sometimes those arguments are necessary to keep the marriage together. You generally choose federalism for two main reasons: spatial organization and diversity.
Spatial organization is just fancy talk for saying a place is too big.
Pretty much. If you are Russia or Canada or the US, you are simply too big to manage every single pothole from one capital city. You have to distribute the workload. But the second reason is the real killer app of federalism: managing diversity.
The notes highlight India here, which I think is the ultimate test case for this.
India is incredible. Over 1 billion people, dozens of major languages, different religions, massive cultural divides between the North and South.
So if you tried to force a strict French-style unitary system on India, like one language, one curriculum, one set of rules,
The country would likely shatter entirely.
always explode.
Federalism acts as a pressure valve. It allows the Tamil speakers in the South to have a state government that operates in Tamil, while the Hindi speakers in the North operate in Hindi. It keeps the country together by letting the regions be different.
It buys unity at the price of uniformity.
That is exactly the phrase to remember. It buys unity at the price of uniformity.
The deep dive also mentions Germany, which I usually don't associate with being messy, but they're federal too.
Germany is interesting because they have a very strict division of labor written into their basic law. The
Right.
federal government handles defense and finance, but the states, the lender, have almost exclusive control over things like education and policing.
So it's less of a scramble and more of a strict partnership.
Right. It's highly organized federalism.
Okay, so we have the two contenders, the efficient machine versus the flexible partnership. The source material suggests a face-off to see how they stack up on specific traits, and I want to run through these because this is where the rubber really meets the road.
Let's do it. Put them in the ring.
Round 1, efficiency, specifically speed of action.
Unitary wins, hands down. If a unitary government faces a crisis, it can pivot the entire ship of state instantly.
And in a federal system,
You have to herd cats. You have to get 50 governors on a conference call. You face lawsuits, pushback. It's a slog.
so for building a highway system or responding to a national emergency, unitary has the structural advantage. Round 2, local responsiveness, actually listening to what people on the ground need.
Federal takes the gold medal here. In a unitary system, you risk having the disconnected bureaucrat, someone sitting in a glass tower in the Capitol making rules for a fishing village they've never even visited.
Whereas in a federal system, the local government is the fishing village.
Exactly. They can pass laws that actually make sense for their specific reality.
Okay, round 3, minority representation. This one feels a little tricky.
It is nuanced, but federalism generally wins out. In a unitary state, you are highly susceptible to majority rule. If 51% of the country wants something, the 49% just lose, even if that 49% is heavily concentrated in one geographic area.
In a federal system, that minority group might actually be the majority within their specific state.
Right, so they can control their own local legislature, protect their language, or pass laws that reflect their culture. They get a stronghold.
It gives them a voice that would otherwise just be drowned out in a massive national vote. Round 4, consistency.
Unitary wins again. Uniformity is the name of the game. In a federal system, you get what the sources call the patchwork effect. And this is where we start seeing the real downsides of the federal model.
The patchwork effect. It sounds quaint, like a quilt, but the notes show it creates some really strange real-world situations.
It creates a ton of confusion. And this brings us right into the real-world friction section of the deep dive. Because when you layer these systems over actual human lives, things get incredibly complicated.
I really love this phrase in the notes, spatial realities. It sounds very sci-fi, but it just means that your rights and your lived reality completely change depending on where you are physically standing.
Correct. Let's look at the first example they give, education. We touched on this with France, but look at the US. Because education is a state power, the curriculum in Florida can be diametrically opposed to the curriculum in Massachusetts.
The notes highlight this specifically. What books are allowed in the library, how history is taught, what topics are considered appropriate for third graders.
Right, so you have localized education. On one hand, that's great. The community gets to decide what their kids learn. But on the other hand, do we really want a country where people have fundamentally different understandings of history or science just because they grew up on opposite sides of a state line?
It creates a totally fragmented reality. If we aren't learning the same basic facts, how do we even talk to each other as adults?
That is the hidden cost of autonomy. You gain local control, but you lose a shared national baseline. You essentially end up with different versions of the truth.
But if we really want to talk about friction and, frankly, pure legal absurdity, we have to talk about the biggest example in the deep dive, the marijuana paradox.
This is the most striking example of federalism looking almost like a glitch in the simulation. It just shouldn't be happening, but it is.
So lay it out for us, because looking impartially at the legal structure and the sources, this shouldn't even be possible.
Ideally, no. Here is the setup. The United States has a supremacy clause. The Constitution and federal law are the supreme law of the land. And federal law classifies marijuana as a Schedule I controlled substance. Illegal. Full stop.
So technically, across the entire map of the U.S., possessing it is a federal crime. No exceptions.
Technically, yes. But because of this federal power-sharing structure, individual states have said, you know what? We disagree. And the notes say we are up to something like 24 subnational units, 24 states that have fully legalized it for recreational use.
So you have the branch offices openly defying headquarters on a major criminal issue.
Openly. And they aren't just defying it, they are regulating it, taxing it, and building a massive industry around it.
How does the system not implode here? Why doesn't the federal government just arrest everyone involved?
They could. Legally, they have every right to. But political reality overrides legal theory here. The federal government has basically chosen a policy of non-enforcement. They are letting the states run this experiment. It's what legal scholars call laboratories of democracy.
But think about the spatial reality for you, the listener. This is where it gets trippy. You can be in Colorado, walking into a highly regulated store with a credit card, buying a product, and paying state sales tax on it.
Yeah.
You are a law-abiding citizen.
Right. Perfectly legal locally.
Then you get in your car, drive 10 miles across the border into Kansas or Nebraska, and suddenly, with that exact same product sitting in your passenger seat, you are a drug trafficker facing prison time.
Yeah.
The substance didn't change. You didn't change. only your geography changed.
It creates a situation where a substance is simultaneously legal and illegal, depending entirely on which police officer is knocking on your window, a local cop or a federal agent. In a unitary state, that simply wouldn't happen. The law is the law everywhere.
A unitary system would resolve that conflict instantly. But here, we just have to live with the ambiguity.
We live with the friction, and that brings us back to that core trade-off we discussed at the very beginning.
So let's synthesize this. We as people generally want two things that are mutually exclusive. We want the efficiency and fairness of the unitary system, where everyone is treated exactly equally and the rules are clear.
Yes.
But we also want the freedom and autonomy of the federal system, where we can be ourselves and govern our own local communities.
That is the eternal tension of governance. Unitary systems prioritize equality. Everyone gets the same thing. Federal systems prioritize liberty. Everyone gets to choose. You just cannot maximize both of those at the exact same time.
And for you listening, understanding this architecture completely changes how you read the news. When you see a headline about a state suing the federal government, or a mayor defying a president, or some region somewhere demanding independence,
You aren't just watching a temporary political argument. You are watching the actual machinery of governance grinding its gears. You are watching the struggle to balance a massive, diverse population without crushing the local spirit.
which leads us to a final thought I want to leave everyone with today. We've talked extensively about how these systems were built for geography, managing land, managing physical distance.
Right, the whole spatial organization aspect.
But we live in a world now where distance is essentially dying.
We are instantly connected. Information flows globally in milliseconds.
Exactly. So here is the question to chew on. In a digital, hyper-connected world, does the federal model of a patchwork of laws still actually make sense? Can we really afford the inefficiency of having 50 different sets of rules for data privacy, for AI, for education, when the whole world is moving at light speed?
Or is that very inefficiency the only thing keeping us safe? Is the messiness of federalism a bug? Or is it the critical feature that prevents one single bad decision from crashing the entire system?
Do you want a fast car that might drive straight off a cliff, or a slow car with 50 different steering wheels? It is definitely something to think about the next time you cross a state line and that speed limit changes. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Always pleasure.